Hello there, I'm here to do the second half of my January wrap-up. January has been a fantastic reading month for me. I read 12 books in total, which I'm really pleased with. I will link the first part of my January wrap-up down below if you're interested. But in the second half of the month I also got quite a lot done. Not many of these are physical books actually looking through, but I'm still counting audiobooks as books because they are books that I have consumed. So let's get started. First I've got Eudora Welty's The Golden Apples. I've had this on my shelf for a while and I've wanted to experience Eudora Welty's writing ever since I became obsessed with Carson McCullers, because I really enjoy Southern American writers. I just love that sort of sad Southern atmosphere in a book. So I was really keen to pick up Eudora Welty. I wasn't sure where to start, so I got The Golden Apples. In hindsight, I don't know this was the best option because it's less of a novel and more a sort of interconnected short story collection really. And I think in the introduction to this it does say that these started as short stories and then Eudora Welty realised that they all sort of had the same characters, so she put them together as a book. But I think I would have preferred to read a complete book for my first experience with her. That said, I really enjoyed the language in this. Her writing is just phenomenal. I've actually highlighted a bit that I would like to read to you because, as always, I think the book does it best to show you just how beautiful it is. So it's: in the cup of her hand, in her filling skin, in the fingers bursting weight and stillness, Nina felt it. Compassion and a kind of competing that were all one, a single ecstasy, a single longing. For the night was not impartial. No, the night loved some more than others, served some more than others. Nina's hand lay open there for a long time, as if its fingers would be its eyes. Then it too slept. She dreamed her hand was helpless to the tearing teeth of wild beasts. It revealed she woke up lying on it. She couldn't move it. She hit it and bit it until, like a cluster of bees, it stung back and came to life. So I could have highlighted so many pieces in this. They were all stunning, but that was one that I particularly wanted to read out. So the writing was amazing and I will definitely be revisiting Eudora Welty. In terms of the writing itself, it was definitely a 5-star for me, but I only gave it 4 purely because I felt like the story it didn't come together as a whole, and there were definitely parts where I felt a bit lost about what was going on. It basically just looks at life in this street, and we kind of follow the different characters and look a bit at their pasts and where they are now, and it's kind of got this bleak undertone all the way through it, as a lot of Southern books do, where things are quite dark and it always feels like you're on the cusp of something terrible. But yeah, for me it just didn't sadly hold together as a complete book. It is just snapshots. It put me a little bit in mind of Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine, in the sense that it's literally just about the life in this village, and the characters that come and go. But yeah, it kind of lacked a little bit in the end for me, but the stunning language made it well worthwhile, and I'll definitely be revisiting Eudora Welty. Then I've got some non-physical books here. Some of them are audio. One of them has gone back to the library, so I'll speak about that first, and that was The Fisherman by Chigozie Obiama. I don't really know how to speak about this book because I enjoyed it and it was amazing, but it was also quite distressing to read and it really quite upset me, and I found that surprising. So basically this is about 4 brothers in Nigeria, and they kind of go against their parents' wishes and go fishing in a really dangerous river just down from their house, and while they're there they bump into a madman who has a prophecy about how one of the brothers is going to die. I don't want to give away too much, so I won't tell you what that prophecy is, but that then has a negative impact on the brothers' relationship, and it kind of, the prophecy itself dictates that it comes true, because in an attempt to stop it from coming true, their lives kind of unravel and ultimately it leads them on the path where it becomes true. This is a very dark novel and it's quite upsetting. It's fantastically written and it is fantastic. But for me, I don't know, like, I like a sad novel. I like a novel that goes down sort of a path that you might not necessarily be comfortable with. I love that. But this was, I can't even say it was violent, but there's a scene in here which is really devastating. I don't really like violence anyway, but generally it won't bother me in a book, but it was the specific type of violence that happened that really, I mean, I was reading the scene in question. If you've read it, you'll know hopefully what I'm talking about, sort of the primary scene of the whole book really. And I was reading it while my dinner was in the oven, and it distressed me to the degree where I couldn't eat my dinner. Like, I went straight off my food. So I can't say that it was an enjoyable experience, but it was a fantastic book, and it's well worth a read if you get a chance to read it. Moving on, I also listened to How Not to Be a Boy by Robert Webb. This is Robert Webb's kind of memoir, but it also kind of veers into the aspect of gender and gender stereotypes, which was really fascinating because I haven't ever read anything about gender stereotypes from the perspective of a guy. It was really, really interesting to get that take. It's also fantastic because he narrates the audiobook himself, so you get that comic personal value in there. I wasn't interested in reading this because I don't particularly know much about Robert Webb. Obviously, I've seen him in Peep Show, but as a comedian, I don't particularly follow him, and it didn't particularly interest me until I saw a lot of people speaking about it and saying how it was related to gender, and I thought I would try it out, and this is fantastic. It is a memoir, but it does so through the guise of what it's like to be a boy who doesn't like typically boy things. So his father was quite an abusive, aggressive, heavy drinking man, and always kind of wanted Robert to be the same way, but Robert was always more on the sensitive side. He didn't like sports, he cried a lot, you know, he was more of an effeminate man, and it kind of looks at how his father dealt with that, or didn't deal with it, how his friendships were affected by it. And also, he obviously goes into issues of feminism in there as well. It was just fantastic, so good. It was one of those audiobooks where I really didn't want it to end, and I'll definitely be re-listening to it, so I would recommend this highly, and if you get a chance to listen to it on audio rather than reading it, I would really recommend that as well. Then I also listened to Knocked Out by My Nunga Nungas by Louise Renison. This is the third in the series of, I don't know what they're called, the Angus, Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging series. I really enjoy these. I can't say much about it because obviously it's the third one, but then there's not much to spoil really. This is basically just the diary of a girl called Georgia during her teen years and sort of looking at her trials and tribulations, and it's just so good. And Louise Renison, who sadly passed away, which is why I started listening to these, she narrates the audiobooks and she's just got the best whiny teenager voice ever. I just love it. What I like about these is that Georgia is not pleasant, she's not nice, she's so selfish and horrible, but because she's so just unaware of herself, she's such a typical teenager, you really have this deep affection for her, and it's just hilarious. I laugh out loud throughout, would highly recommend. Then I also listened to the Reservoir Tapes by John McGregor. I didn't know these existed until the other day, and I went straight away to listen to them. I don't know if it's a bit of a cheat including them here, because I did listen to them in audio format. When it was first broadcast, it was a Radio BBC 4 short play kind of thing, and it was 15-minute segments, and there's 15 of them. These are related to Reservoir 13. In kind of a roundabout way. You don't have to listen to these if you want to read Reservoir 13, but I would highly recommend doing so. Because in Reservoir 13, and I think probably a lot of people will have a problem with the fact that a girl goes missing, but it's not really about that, that's just the inciting incident, and then we follow the lives of the people that impacts, like a ripple, I suppose. I think a lot of people would probably be maybe frustrated that they don't see more about what happened to the girl. If you want to know more about that, listen to the Reservoir Tapes, because it very much looks more at the case surrounding what happened to the girl. And although we don't ultimately find out what happened to her, we sort of have a few different perspectives of what could possibly have happened. And you'll also meet new characters in here, you revisit people from the book. It's just fantastic. I really enjoyed listening to them. I would say that some of the beauty of John McGregor's writing was lost slightly in the audio format. I wouldn't say that he's an author that necessarily suits audiobooks, especially not with Reservoir 13, because it is so not dense, but there's so many characters and so much to keep on top of. I think listening to it in audio, you would just feel absolutely lost. I still really enjoyed listening to these, and I think also because they were written to be on the radio, they're kind of easier to follow in that format. Yes, I thought I would mention this. It's now a book, which is why I'm including it in my reading wrap-up, and it is on Goodreads, so I've added it on Goodreads, so I thought I would talk to you about it here. Then back onto the physical books, I have got Possession by A.S. Byatt, which took me quite a substantial chunk of the second half of this month. I have had this on my shelf for the longest time, and it's been one of those books that I've been on the brink of picking up for about 3 years now, so I finally got round to it. I wasn't doing too badly with my reading. I thought I could take some time over it, and I'm really glad actually that I waited to read it until now, because I think if I'd read it sort of 3 years ago when I'd first intended to read it, I don't think I would have got it. I think it would have been too dense for me, and I would have just got completely lost. Whereas as it is, I could really appreciate this. So this is a 5-star read for me. It was probably closer to 4.5 because I thought the ending was a little bit overwritten, but in terms of the creation of this, I had to give it a 5-star. It's just such a fantastic feat of literature. So this looks at the relationships between a fictional pair of poets from the past. We start off with a scholar called Roland who ends up finding a letter from Randolph Henry Ashe, the imagined poet, to somebody saying sort of he had a wonderful time, it was lovely meeting them. He knew that this letter was a completely new discovery, so he then goes on the trail of who the letter was to and what was happening there. And I won't give too much away because it's a bit of a mystery, but you get such a rich depth of their relationship, as well as having these letters between these imagined historical literary figures. You also get pretty much their whole backlog of work. So not only is there a fantastic story in here, but there are also fantastic poems which last whole chapters. There are short stories written by these imagined people. So A.S. Byatt has really created a complete world within this novel, and that is why I had to give it 5 stars. I have in the past read A.S. Byatt's short stories and I wasn't overly blown away with them, and when I started reading this, for the first 50 pages or so, I wasn't getting into it. It is dense, it's really dense, hence why it took me so long to read. But if you feel in the mood to tackle a book which is a bit of a challenge, I would highly recommend. Then I ended on a short story collection, which is also my book challenge for the month, of a book that I haven't heard spoken about on BookTube, and that is Balancing on the Edge of the World by Elizabeth Baines. Elizabeth Baines is the author of The Birth Machine, which I read last year as part of my Paddling in Independent Publishers series, and I was very excited to find out she had a short story collection, so I rushed to get it, and as it's only short, I sort of picked it up right at the end of the month. This is a difficult one because it was really good and the writing is so strong, but at the same time I feel like sometimes some of the stories were a bit more style than substance. There were some stories that just either they went over my head a bit, or I felt like they kind of were focusing so much on the pretty language and the pretty metaphors that they didn't actually have much meaning behind them. That might be a completely unfair judgment, but there's certainly one which was Leaf Memories, and there was another one about a boy at the beach, which I just did, as I say, I felt like they were focusing so much on beautiful language that they kind of lost their meaning, which kind of made them quite forgettable. I have to say, flicking through now, there are a few that I can't remember what happened in them. There were some that were really good in here. Power, which is around the middle of the collection, was fantastic. I can't criticise the writing in here, which is why I gave it 4 stars, but I do think that some of the stories could have perhaps made a little bit more of themselves. But anyway, I would still recommend this, and I'm definitely going to check out more Elizabeth Baines. So that is everything I read in January. Let me know down below what you've been reading, and I'll see you next time. Bye!